Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It is Monday. That means J Leman, All-American linebacker, Illini Inquirer football analyst, is here. We will chat about Illinois' win over Northwestern, getting back that hat a third time in a fourth year. We will talk about the Big Ten championship game, Purdue coaching change, Ohio State coaching change coming. We will talk about that. But also, of course, we got to talk about a 9-win Illinois football season. Because, Jay, here we are on December 2nd. And we're going to talk about a 9-win season for Illinois, the first since you were a player at Illinois in 2007, and a likely Citrus Bowl berth. How did this happen, Jay?
You just got to soak it in, though, for a second, because we've been through a lot of tough times, Jeremy, right? I mean, you more than anybody, because I feel like you really got into, the 2010s is kind of your, coverage window. And you started kind of at the bottom, and we went, kind of like that. And so I give you a lot of credit for sticking with it. And we really got to cherish the good times, because you don't know that the past history of Illinois football has been, you don't know when you're going to get it again. But I'll tell you what, this definitely feels different. I'm not going to say that Ron Zook's didn't feel like it was sustainable with some of the guys they were bringing to campus in that 2007, 2008, 2009 window when they led the Big Ten in first-round draft picks for 3 or 4 years, which is just an astounding stat for the University of Illinois with what you've seen Ohio State and Michigan do in the draft class lately. But how did they get here? Has to start at the top. Bret Bielema's got the right people on the bus. Barry Lunny was a big hire in year 2. Got a quarterback in Luke Altmaier. Those are the big things, right? Those are the things you got to have to give yourself a chance. And then they've been able to put enough pieces together to have a serviceable offensive line, a serviceable defensive line, a couple NFL players sprinkled in, and develop talent like Pat Bryant to be a game breaker and be a big play guy for you. And then find a way to win close football games. And they've done that, and you find yourself at 9-3. So I'm certainly happy with what Bret's done. There's obviously more to it, but those are the big building blocks that I think he's put together.
Jay, I want to go over some of the Northwestern stuff, but it is a time to kind of reflect, right,
Sure.
on what this has become. Illinois has won 8+ games, I think 16 times now in their history. 2 have come over the last 3 years. Like when you hired Bret Bielema, this would have been a dream. 8 wins, 9-win season, 2 times in the first 4 years. What has made him the guy? What has made him the guy that gives you, me, confidence that Illinois can sustain success? Like, maybe it's not 9 wins next season,
right?
But you feel like Illinois should be going bowling. Like they should be doing what we long have hoped this program would do.
They should be going bowling, and they should be year in and year out close to a 500 team in conference. The fact that we were 6-3 in conference, to me, is almost as impressive as being 9-3 overall, because the conference wins have been hard to come by. Being over 5, I'm not sure the last time we were over 500 in conference.
It was
maybe it was 2007.
2022. They were what?
2022. I'll say that they were probably 5-4.
Yeah.
Or 5-3.
They've done it 4 times since 1991, Jay. 01, 07, 22, 20.
Which is astounding. But how did he do it? Number one, he created an identity. Every good football team has an identity. The teams we've often aspired to be, like Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan State in the D'Antonio era, have an identity. Northwestern, when they had it going on with Fitz a little bit and went to 2 division championships, they have an identity. He's done that. When Josh Whitman said, we studied programs like Kansas State, Iowa, Wisconsin that were historically bad at one point and then got historically consistent and good, we found there was a common thread of Bret Bielema, right? So it starts with Bret. I think number 2, you have to go ahead and, all your behavior is a product of belief in life, and especially when it comes to the mental toughness of football. So changing that mindset. I still remember the first game that Bret won with Nebraska. I think the post-game press conference, maybe on Monday or something, was like, I didn't realize how crazy people would go after we beat a team like Nebraska, right? It was just like one game, but he was just like, okay, chill. And so the expectations were higher, but changing the mindset of, here we go again to, hey, we belong and we can win, and we can win in these close games. Number 3, we knew that Bret coming in was a developer of talent, right? he certainly took some of those 2022 guys and developed them into higher caliber players. But we've seen Pat Bryant develop. We've seen the Kreutz brothers start to develop. We've seen some of these defensive backs on the back end develop. We've seen Luke Altmaier develop. So we're starting to see the developmental piece. And then now we were wondering, when are the recruits going to start to come in? It seems like it's starting to stem the tide. They've got a couple pieces in the portal last year, and now getting some, and as you know better than anybody, out of the high school ranks, a higher caliber of player. And so you add all those things together, along with the right assistant coaches, and I cannot emphasize enough, a quarterback in this era of college football, so important. You have a team that found a way to get 9 wins. I'm not sure how much I believe, Bret, that he smiled after the Northwestern loss last year, knowing what he had. I mean, it's easy to say that now. I was pretty pissed. I was pretty upset. There was only 5 wins. I'm sure there was part of him that's maybe he did know as a lot more than he knows this team better than we do. I'll give him that. Did he know that they were going to have 9 wins? I think maybe he did the potential. He certainly didn't map it out how he was going to get there with last-second wins against Rutgers and overtime against Purdue and Nebraska, but they got there, and that's the important thing.
Yeah, and listen, Illinois probably overachieved a little bit with some of those close wins. Some
Sure.
luck is involved there, but also finding a way to win close has become a skill. I think we talked about that last week, Jay. But
that's that Iowa identity. I'll just tell you.
Yeah.
You watched that Iowa game on. I'm sitting and watching that game with my family on Friday. And, Iowa can't get anything going. They have one lucky play that Caleb Johnson makes. But I'm like, just wait. Something's going to happen. They're going to get a turnover. It's going to happen. And you think it's not going to happen. But with 20 seconds left, they get a sack fumble and kick a 50-yard field goal, right?
Well, that's what I was getting to is like you're starting to do those Iowa-like things where you expect to win that way. And I went over it after the game. I actually did before the game because I thought Illinois would beat Northwestern. The last 3 years of the Big Ten West, RIP, Iowa and Nebraska was a great representation of what we remember of the Big Ten.
Yeah.
But the last 3 years, Big Ten play, Jay, Iowa 18-9, that's the best among those Big Ten West programs. Illinois is second, 14-13 in the Big Ten.
Wow.
Minnesota's next, 13-14. Wisconsin, 12-15.
Wow.
You've passed them up in this conference right now.
Wow.
Nebraska still struggling at 10-17. Purdue 9-18. Northwestern 8-19. So Purdue, Northwestern, Wisconsin all falling. Minnesota kind of staying stable. Iowa staying stable. Nebraska kind of staying stable. Illinois is the one rising. And I know Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon are all in this conference, USC. But when I'm thinking of what Bret Bielema was hired to do, that's it, right? Is to be what Wisconsin was, be what Iowa was, and they're starting to show those signs.
Well, you stabilize the program. You see those bottom 3 programs have had transition at coaching, right? You stabilize the program. Some we haven't had. We haven't had the ability to keep coordinators here long-term that we're developing or replace them with high-level corners. Say what you want about, Kirk Ferentz, has 2 defensive coordinators in his time there, Norm Parker and Phil Parker. Has 3 or 4 offensive coordinators, and some of them they made him change because he didn't want to change, right? And you kind of get that feeling, and they have that mindset, something's going to happen, we're going to make a play. And we kind of have that mindset. It's a little different, looks a little different for Illinois because it usually comes out of the quarterback play of, hey, our quarterback's going to make a play or Pat Bryant's going to do something. But we believe, and so you have that stabilization there, and you have a consistent winner. This is what you want. And you are winning some of these recruiting battles with other good Power 5 teams. I saw you got to help me with his name. The JUCO linebacker Conte.
Ishmael Conte, yeah.
Conte. I saw K-State offered him. I saw he had offers, I believe, from Minnesota. I believe he had some other offers, right? That you're beating out the right people. Where it felt like in the 2010s we were beating out Bowling Green. We were beating out Toledo. I'm not saying you can't get good players. I think Gabe Ackus, we had to beat out Tulane and maybe Tennessee late. I think came in late, right? But for the most part, you want to be beating out those other guys. Not so much. I think 247's rankings are great, right? But I mean, you want to see who other people are offering, right? Who's offering it?
Fair. I think that's a better evaluation tool for fans than rankings.
Who else thinks he's good, right? I mean, nobody offered J Leman because he was garbage in high school, right? So it's like
we whiffed on that. Okay.
He's 3-star, right? Yeah, we proved it wrong. But that being said, you see it on all levels. And something that I want to talk about that it's good that we know is off the field stuff. I mean, we really haven't. You really got to give him credit. I mean, no news is great news off the field. It has never come across that this football team is undisciplined on the field, lower in penalties, or undisciplined off the field. It's great. And I think you got to really say, when we've seen stuff hijack off the field and off the court stuff, last year, although totally vindicated, we're not going to talk about that with Terrence Shannon. He's innocent, but it totally set off that season for a little bit. We haven't had that in football, and that's a credit to Bret Bielema as far as high character individuals and standards within that program. We just haven't had that at all.
All right, Jay, I want to get back to this, but let's talk about some of the few Northwestern things here. Luke Altmaier actually was kind of an issue for Illinois early in this game with some of his throws. But, man, a strong run game really just dominated this game and paced Illinois for victory. Aiden Lawfrey, 172 rushing yards, 3 long touchdowns. The offensive line, though, like what did you see from Aiden and the offensive line that led to some success against the Northwestern front that I thought was pretty solid coming in?
First off, I'll give credit to Josh Cruz. I think Josh has gotten better each game. I think he's playing at a high level. I can see him being an all Big Ten center next year if he continues to take the leaps that he's doing. But quite frankly, I thought Geske played one of his better games. Geske was starting to maul people at that level that we thought he would be a mauler at. So I thought Josh Geske played well. We had seen him have some flashes in the Michigan game and whatnot. So I thought he played better. But I want to give credit to Aiden Lawfrey. We talk about, for a while there, it felt like Josh McCray was the only guy that could make a guy miss or break a tackle, right? And I think the first big run that Aiden Lawfrey had, he made 2 guys miss in the hole.
Yeah.
And I think that's a product of health for sure. I think that's a product of confidence. But in the Big Ten, in college football, you're going to have a free player for most defenses that you got to make miss. Can you make that guy miss? I don't think we've had a back that can necessarily do that since Caden Fagan went down. McCray started to get better at that. And then when we saw Aiden Lawfrey have that ability to make somebody miss in the hole, and he just has a different gear to turn 10-yard runs into 40-yard runs. And I think that's the speed that made him a coveted recruit out of high school that we were waiting to see. He's been bogged down by some injuries, some hamstring stuff. But, man, what I was really impressed with was, number 1, his ability to make people miss in the hole. Number 2, his speed. But 3, his vision has gotten way better, right, as far as finding where to cut out, where to cut in. And so I think it was the offensive line for sure. I also think Aiden Lawfrey's taken the next step.
Yeah, he set up that safety. Like there's a couple of runs where he just like set up the safety and then make the move and had a huge hold there. And just the type of speed, like I know we saw Fagan do one, McCray break a couple tackles and do one, but just the speed we haven't seen since Chase Brown to break away. Right. And I think Khalil can be that, but I just don't think the vision is quite there. So to see it all come together with Aiden Lawfrey and him to have this game to end the season, leading this team in rushing, Jay, it's like that's what Illinois coaches have been talking about for a long time. And it's the kind of development that you across this roster, we could talk about this, especially on the defensive side, that makes you think even when you lose a Pat Bryant, you might have other guys step up and become the players that take.
Well, it has to be based on running the football, right? I think when we struggled in football games, we had an inability to run and really stop the run. You look at the Michigan-Ohio State game where 23 years in a row, the team that ran the ball better won the football game. You have to be able to run the football. And even when your best players don't play their best, and Luke Altmaier would certainly say he didn't play his best against Northwestern, the run game is demoralizing and basically covers a multitude of errors. And you look at this offensive line that, other than J.C. Davis, should all be returning. And you have a stable of backs that should all be returning. I know in the portal era, you never know, but let's just say they all return. And you have a lot of backs that have some great experience, as it was really a running back by committee. You feel really good that this running attack could be at the standard of what some of Bret's Wisconsin and Arkansas teams were last year in combination with a veteran quarterback. It could be a pretty special offense next year, especially if they have some of those dynamic players in the backfield like Lawfrey breaking big runs like he was doing.
Pat Bryant made it seem like he wants to play in the bowl game. Of course, he's got his own future to think about here, but you can tell he cares about it. But if that's the way to go out, that's a great way to go out with that 43-yard catch and run. I mean, just everything about that was Pat Bryant and was about this special season. So
I'm not even sure
being there too was awesome. So
yeah, and Brandon Lloyd making the trip, I thought that was cool on his own dime and coming over. But I was looking at that route. I wasn't sure if that was just Pat making a play for Luke or if it was a design double move. Either way, it was a double move. I just don't know if he just said, I'm just going to go deep, because he saw Luke kind of stepping up and scrambling. But again,
Luke said it was supposed to be for Zakari.
Okay.
They saw credit the offensive line for protecting for like 5 seconds.
Okay, got you.
But Pat made a play. He said Pat just made a play, and I gave him the ball.
And see, that's what playing together with guys over 2 years does. You get plays like that. That's not a designed play. That's two guys in the backyard saying, okay, the first route didn't work, go deep. And Luke's ability to have great touch on that. And really, Pat Bryant's ability to run after the catch has been really, really special this year. I think that's just different. And what I'm interested to see is Pat Bryant's influence, like Isaiah's influence on him. What is Pat Bryant's influence on a guy like Colin Dixon, on a guy like Hank Beatty? Do they take the next step next year? I think Colin Dixon in a secondary receiver role this year, certainly to Franklin and Bryant. When you hear Coach Bielema talk about him, he could have a much more highlighted role coming up. I mean, he certainly was more productive than Bryant was as a freshman, right? So you're like, okay, can we develop these guys? But Pat Bryant's been just really, I think this term is thrown out way too much, but the alpha of that offense. I mean, really, you need a play, you need an enforcer. I don't care that he plays receivers. It's been Pat Bryant, and he's been as clutch as they come. I don't know how you keep him. If you've watched Illinois, I don't know how you keep him off the first ballot of the all Big Ten team. I mean, I know Jeremiah Smith has crazy numbers and plays for Ohio State, but I'm not sure you would find a guy with bigger catches at more important times than Pat Bryant. He's got to be on that the top two receivers in the league.
Yeah, Ty Felton put up great numbers for Maryland, but that was not a good team. So I had Jeremiah Smith and Pat Bryant. I just thought Pat Bryant's impact on his team was as big as any wide receivers in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and Ty Felton, and not a knock on Maryland, but I mean, the way their offense runs, they have a lot of dink and dunk, and I'm sure Felton had a bunch more catches and the yardage was probably way less, right? I mean, that's just kind of how they do it.
Yeah. So, no, he had like double the catches as Pat Bryant, but like the same yards. So
okay, so there you go. Yeah. So, something like that. That's just that's a Loxley to a T. Get it to your guys and let them in space. So
sweater weather pairs perfectly with savory fall foods, but with your busy schedule, sometimes it's hard to eat the way you'd like to. That's where Factor comes in. Their chefs do the shopping and chopping to bring you fresh, never frozen, fully cooked meals right to your doorstep. All you have to do is heat and eat. All their meals are dietitian approved, so you know you're getting the nutrition you need along with the fall flavors that you crave. And when it comes to meals, everyone wants the same thing, options. That's why Factor offers 35 wholesome meals every week, including Gourmet Plus, Keto, Calorie Smart, Vegan, and Veggie, so you'll always find something you love that suits your lifestyle. And there's more to Factor than just lunches and dinners. From easy breakfasts and smoothies to delectable midnight snacks, Factor has over 60 plus add-ons that keep you fueled and focused 24/7. And with a plethora of flavors, you'll never get bored. This fall, you've got a lot going on outside the kitchen, so keep your plans and turn to Factor. They deliver fresh, nutritious, chef-prepared meals ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So head to factormeals.com/Illini50 and use code Illini50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. That's code Illini50 at factormeals.com/Illini50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. All right, Malachi Hood, Jay, he showed some stuff. Other Illinois.
I'm excited about Malachi Hood.
Give me your linebacker take on Malachi Hood. What excites you about it?
Well, first of all, you can just see he's like, in a good way, a young Colt, meaning like he's got a lot to like build on, right? I mean, like he's nowhere near filled out what he's going to be. But as far as his ability to make plays in space and run, but still have some pop to him is really, really unique. I think he was a safety in high school, I believe. and, comes up to linebacker, and it takes a little while to get the feeling of being in the box and kind of see him going all over the place. But I don't think there's another guy on the roster that has the twitch, the ability to blitz when asked to blitz, because he was a great blitzer this past game. His ability to on point of contact be violent, right? And his ability, which has been exposed, to cover backs and tight ends when asked in space, because he has that safety background. And that's been attacked, especially in our man-to-man schemes, by a lot of offenses. We saw it first and foremost by Kansas last year. We've seen it documented. I see it documented when Purdue plays any team, they get blasted on that. More on Purdue later, I'm sure. But that being said, he does all those things really well. I think if we can get him a little bit more beefed up for every down power lead that you're going to see in the Big Ten, this guy can be a starter and can be a really good football player at this level.
The other thing about this game, Jay, I mean, you're seeing a lot of defensive depth developed. When we talk about James Krutz, the way he ended the season, I thought linebackers were a strength of this team the last 3 games. I get the opponents you're playing, but I thought it was nice to see. Makrosedic, a couple good games to end the season. Joe Barna played. Alex Bray had one of his better games. Jeremiah Warren, Pat Farrell getting worked in there.
Right.
Jim Clark playing the number 1 cornerback role. It just really helped them close the season well. Right. I mean, the schedule had something to do with that, but 3 straight wins with some guys that really stepped up that we didn't know were going to make an impact at all this season. So I think that's another great sign for this program and this defense for next year too.
Huge sign, right? We've been in the 2010s. I hate going back to the 2010s, but before Bielema was here, we were razor thin, right? A couple of injuries and it would just decimate the team. There's a reason those guys didn't start. They probably didn't, perform as good as the people that were starting, but you certainly didn't feel like there was a huge drop-off. I remember watching Malachi Hood and in the Michigan State game. I felt, man, he's really solid. I remember seeing Alex Bray, who his stats will not pop off the page like a Johnny Newton stats for the position he plays, but I thought he did a great job of doing his job and started to flash a little bit later in the season. That's what it starts with. Can you do your job consistently? I think Joe Barna, before he got hurt, and talking to Aaron Henry, really excited about Joe Barna. You might not feel like there's a big drop-off at that outside linebacker position. You feel like Jaheim Clark has some juice, like his namesake says, right? So, and Pat Farrell, you feel like was able to give you some reps when you needed some reps. Gentle Hunt was able to get in there late, right? You saw that out of the portal. And so you see what's so interesting about football, I don't think people realize this, is you get better playing the games. Now you get better in practice, but I say this because like if you go play basketball, you're basically playing live basketball. It may not be game speed, but football, a defensive player especially, an offensive lineman, it's very difficult to simulate outside of a game the full speed physicality of a football game. And so to get those guys game reps is the most important thing, right? And so what I love is you could literally see them get better game to game to game because they're playing at that full speed motion. Football is so unique in that regard, is that you have to play full speed to necessarily get better because the cuts are different, the tackles are different, the blocks are different. And we saw them get those game reps. And this is what it feels like when it's not just like Illinois having some amazing class in 2001 or 2007, and there's no experience on the back end. It feels like you're peppering experience in there, and you have a great mix of character and high athletic guys. Resedic has been way more explosive than I thought. You saw him take off on the pick. You see him on the punt return sometimes. So there's a lot of good things to be happy about.
All right, Jay, a little bit more big picture on this season. Barry Lunny is a Broyles Award nominee. The offense wasn't great enough to be a finalist for this award or anything like that. But I know you felt this way, and I feel this way. Like, I think an extension is in the cards for him. Like,
sure.
They averaged 29 points per game. It's the most since 2013 when Shieldhouse and Cubitt were here. You feel great about that quarterback room long-term. Like, what has Barry Lunny brought to this program with an offensive identity that Illinois has lacked for a long time?
I can't speak highly enough about Barry Lunny. First off, you got to give him credit for coming here just as a coordinator with no real coaches with him. He came here, kind of inherited a staff, and has now put Thad Ward and Robbie Disher and Justin Stepp kind of on his staff. And you've seen the offense get better and better and better. And so, and when you do that in comparison, as we've talked about, to Purdue's offense or what you saw with Northwestern's offense or Wisconsin's offense. By the way, some of those coordinators are gone with Nebraska's offense. Satterfield gets demoted. Holgerson takes over. You see games that you're like, okay, these offenses are not that good. And you see Barry Lunny, former quarterback, he wants to throw the football. He wants to have a downfield attack, but he knows that you have to run the football, and Bret wants to run the football. I think Barry wants to run the football too. And so you have a really good mix. What I think was different about this offense is Barry Lunny's ability to get his playmakers chunk plays, mainly Pat Bryant, sometimes Zachary Franklin, but they got chunk plays, lots of big plays, especially the second half of the season. That was a game changer. We said they'd have to get 30 points a game. We thought to win 7 games. Hey, they got 29 points a game, but they were the right points, right? I will say this. If there's a knock on Barry, it's that Illinois didn't always start fast, but his fourth quarter play calling was exceptional, right? When it counted most and Illinois needed a play, Luke and Lunny were on it, right? And so you got to give Lunny credit that when he needed plays, he was good. There was a big knock on Lunny. He couldn't score touchdowns in the red zone in 2022. They were really, really good. They were really, really good in the red zone. Guys, he didn't have a full-time healthy running back the entire year. They had a bunch of guys with 300 to 500 yards, basically, right? So he didn't have a bell cow back there. So it's not just one guy. He spread it all around. Now, let me zoom out a little bit here to bigger. I think Chip Kelly was a bad hire for Ohio State. Take away his name being Chip Kelly, right? And you say John Doe got the job at Ohio State. Their numbers were not typical Ohio State offensive numbers. I can make the argument that Kevin Wilson, who I've always thought is an offensive genius, not sure he's a great head coach at Indiana, has always been an offensive genius, was putting up 35 a game, 40 a game at Indiana with some guys that you never – I think Kevin Wilson was a better OC. They went and get Chip Kelly. I know there's a relationship there. They're bad offensively compared to the talent that they have. I think you put Lunny on Ohio State, he'd score more points than Barry Lunny would. Barry Lunny would score more points than Chip Kelly would with that offense. I'll take that any day of the week with some of the big plays that Lunny dialed up and the offensive weapons that they have. So I feel really good where we're at offensive coordinator-wise. And I think you have to look around the league to say, wow, there is some other than Oregon's guy and Cotel Nicky at Penn State. Yeah. You feel like you got a really good coordinator at Illinois.
Yeah, I would be shocked if he's not a 7-figure coordinator next year. I think he's earned that at this point. Yeah. Aaron Henry was a big question coming into the season. It wasn't always pretty. I mean, Purdue's second half really continues to stand out the end of that Rutgers game. But, I mean, they go from 29 points per game allowed, Jay, to 22. What did you think of his growth and his future?
You know, one thing I've always appreciated about Aaron is I always felt like he's taken ownership of everything. I never have seen him point fingers, and I give him credit for that. There was a big jump from year 1 to year 2. I mean, we were worried about the secondary. We felt like that became a strength, although it got beat up later in the season. That seems to be what Illinois' pattern is. Their secondary gets beat up. And they got enough pieces on the defensive line to make it work, strengthened, of course, by Dennis Briggs in the portal and T-Rob really playing great in the interior, and Alex Bray giving good minutes and some of those other guys. So the linebackers did struggle. Rosette was productive, but we saw those linebackers really grow over the season, specifically games 8 through 12. We saw them get better and better and better. So from those positions, we saw them get better. But one thing I thought that Bret said is they did a good job with knowing our guys' limitations and what we do well. And if you're at Illinois, that's the key. Because you're not going to have everybody, right? You can't, I'll use myself. You can't go have me guard the number 2 receiver in the slot. It's just going to be a long day for me. I'm just not that good at it. Hey, if you want me to stop power and lead, that's great. Get guys lined up, that's great, right? And so you have to what are guys good at? What is Matthew Bailey good at that, Mac Resetich or Miles Scott isn't? That's why they play free safety. What is Gabe Akis really good at that maybe Alex Bray isn't, and knowing where to set guys up. And then I think that the Kansas game from 2 years ago had such an effect on this of not giving up the big play and not bending but not breaking that they were like, not breaking, bending, but not breaking, that almost to a fault at times, it felt like they were too conservative.
Yeah.
And so
that was my biggest critique of it the entire season, right? Like it was on these third downs and longs, like, let's rush 4. Like that's at least
let's rush 4. Let's bring Malachi Hood like we did against Northwestern, right? We saw some pressures. And so I think when they go in the self-scout in the offseason, they're going to say, okay, we were a little bit reactive on bending but not breaking. Can we now manufacture some pressure on the quarterback with pressure, leave our guys out to drive, that we have a more experienced secondary? And I think you will see that. I think at times we were too conservative and let people chew up too much clock and know that we got to get the ball back to our offense because Luke can make a play, rather than let's go win the game as a defense and make the play. I didn't feel that from this defense, where you certainly felt it from this defense in 2022, that they felt like they had to make a play to win the game. And so I want both the offense and the defense to feel like they got to make a play to win the game. And we certainly saw it from special teams. That's a whole other topic, but they did well as well.
Yeah, go for it, Jay. I mean, Hank Beatty, huge impact. It felt like Bret was right. Almost every game, it felt like Illinois had a slight or better special teams advantage. And again, we talk about the margins of these victories being so small. It came up huge.
Well, I'm trying to remember a better punt returner in the history of Illinois football than Hank Beatty. We've had some really bad punt returners in their day. Of course, I thought Dudek was good, but could never really stay healthy. But I'm trying to think in the history of Illinois punt returners, and again, my consciousness goes back to the mid-'90s.
D'Angelo Bentley was good.
Who?
D'Angelo Bentley was good.
D'Angelo Bentley, yep. He had some stuff. But the consistency of Beatty is really unrivaled in my mind. Just his ability to catch the ball, make the first guy miss, and get upfield. I don't think he'll set any – he's certainly not slow, but he's not going to be a burner. But he's certainly got that feel for it, and it's been an advantage. Of course, you got to go back to the fake punt against Michigan. Huge call as well. And although our net punt maybe wasn't as good as what we wanted to get, we were very solid in our coverage units and whatnot. And I'll shout out, I believe, Tanner Heckel, number 16. I think we'll see him on defense next year. You saw him at the gunner position. He's a guy I think that really popped at that gunner position.
Yeah, I'm waiting for whatever sleeper safety they get this year because it's always a good one. I mean, Matthew Bailey, percentage, Tanner Heckel, it's worked out pretty well for them. All right, Jay, we just talked about all these goods. Give me a concern moving forward, or a concern you had this year, because it's not easy to win. We've seen that. It's not easy to turn an 8-win season into another bowl season. It's not going to be easy to turn a 9-win season into another 8 or 9 season. So what concerns do you have?
I think my biggest concern is getting Luke Altmaier back. He doesn't remind me of a guy that wants to shop around or that would leave Lunny after his success. But I stopped making predictions in this portal area about who's back and who's not, because you just never know. So that's one of my bigger concerns. Number 2 is, can we take the next step on the offensive line to be dominant at the line of scrimmage? That was really the issue, especially on the interior at the guard position. We just didn't play at the consistent level. So I am concerned about that. And then number 3 is the defensive line. I know that Gabe may be done playing at Illinois. Hopefully not. Hopefully Gabe comes back. It sounds like Seth Coleman's got an injury that we don't know if he's going to be back, and his eligibility's done. Yeah. I know Alec Bryant can come back, I think.
Yes, he's got one more year, but he went to senior day. Yeah.
With the 7th year. And then Dennis Briggs is done and T-Rod's done. And so you're kind of like, how are we going to fill in that? I feel better at the linebacker with some of the recruits we've got. I saw that, Grant Bierman and Conte and then also the development of Kreutz and Rosiak getting back. And it could be one of our deeper positions next year, Malachi Hood. But I think those are the things that I'm most concerned about when I think about this. And locking up Barry Lunny. Honestly, how can we keep Barry Lunny here? I know there's probably an extension in the mix, and good coordinators you can't usually keep for long because somebody's usually going to come pick them off. So I think those are my concerns. I think defensively as well, I want to see us be more aggressive. We kind of got the turnovers going there later in the year. There was a big lull there in the middle of the year where we just weren't getting a ton of pressure. We weren't getting a ton of turnovers. And so I want to see that as well. Those are my concerns, but they pale in comparison to what they used to be.
Correct. I just wanted to balance this out, right? To make sure it's like, hey, there's still some challenges. And I agree with you. I think retention this offseason, as you said, with coaching staff, because, man, those assistants, whether it's Corey Parker or Justin Stepp or Sinton and Archie McDaniel, who I thought was phenomenal late in the season and is doing well in recruiting, keeping those guys is all really important. You know, a guy like Terrence Jamison has been so important to your program
Sure.
and developing. I'm sure he's going to be a guy who always is going to get interest. But then it's about, you know, keeping your best players. And kudos to Bret Bielema. He has done that. Like, there have not been a lot of guys, and he mentioned this the other day, and I looked it up last week, that have left and have done better, right? So that's good. I agree with you. I think Luke, with what happened at Ole Miss, I think what he's got here, he really appreciates. But, man, like, he's got one more year of eligibility. I don't know if he's an NFL guy. So you just got to be competitive there, right? You got to be able to competitively do it. And that's why, you know, upping the NIL, upping the revenue sharing, whatever it is going to be really important. But that's why for a program like this, Jay, to keep building, you got to retain. And retaining your two deep, retaining your coaches, retaining your quarterback. I think
that's the hard part about building a program now as opposed to 10 years ago, is the retention. Because you're always going to have, you know, I don't want to call them vultures, but people that are bigger programs try to cherry pick your best guys. And so I think retention's big, and the job has gotten more complicated, but they also getting paid the big bucks. And so, you know, Bret gets paid $7 million a year to get it done. And I'm sure he can figure it out. And he's figured out how to get 9 wins in college football. If you're paying under $1 million a win in college football, you're doing pretty good. Think about it. You think about the contracts out there, right? I mean, what was Walters getting paid? $4 million? Well, they paid $4 million for every win they had because they only had one, right? So Ryan Day, he's getting paid $10 million. Well, they have 10 wins. So there you go. So you kind of get what you pay for in college football.
Top portal needs, Jay. I mean, defensive line, offensive line.
Yeah, defensive line. I thought maybe left tackle, unless they believe Brandon Henderson is that guy at left tackle as far as offensive tackle. But yeah, so you got to go get a defensive tackle. You might want to go get another DN. Daniel Brown and Joe Barna, I think, can be really good. JoJo Hayden has seen this, but do you need another guy as much as you rotate those guys in, right? I don't necessarily know. I think Conte fills kind of your portal need. He's a JUCO guy of a guy that can play right now. And you got Rosiak, you got Crute. So I don't necessarily see that as a portal. I do think
the emergence of Hood, right? Like you get
an emergence of
Conte and Hood. I'm like, I feel a lot better about that position.
You feel a lot better. You got everybody on the back end really coming back. I believe Cox has one more year, correct?
Yeah.
And I do think you'll see them jump into the portal to get a more experienced receiver. I think with Franklin and Bryant gone, I think they're going to say, hey, look, this is what we can do. These are some of the numbers that these guys put up. Will we get Ashton Hollins back? Yes. Will Wilcher probably take a leap and Beatty and Colin Dixon be there? Yes. But I think they're going to leap into the portal for that. I don't see them leaping in the portal really for a back because they feel good about probably where they're at right now. But I can definitely see it guard, tackle, and receiver.
Yeah, because, I mean, get Altmaier back, and you got to make the most of that, right, Jay? Because that's one of the best quarterbacks you've had. So, getting just an experienced guy, like another Franklin type, would be huge.
Well, huge, crafty, experience, right? Another question is, how can you keep a backup there? You hope that Leary, who's been the clear number 2, it seems like, stays. If Luke stays, I know they're high on Trey Petty as well. Can he develop into something? Who is your number 2? We've seen it in other years. I mean, I think this is really the first year we haven't had a backup quarterback start in a long time. You're right. I mean,
not really play a snap of significance outside of what, the 2-point.
That's it, right? I mean, so I think last year you obviously had the John Paddock. Brandon DeVito went down, and Sitkowski had to fill in for the Iowa game. Peters went down in year one, and Sitkowski filled in. And so it's been a while since we've had a guy make it. He certainly took enough shots, and I know everybody held their breath in that Northwestern hit with the shoulder that he kind of fell on. But, Luke was tough. I'll give him that.
You guys have heard me talk up HomeField apparel for a while now, but now is the time to get to HomeFieldApparel.com because they have their most ambitious sale to date, their Black Friday sale. 30% off site-wide on everything at HomeField Apparel, which is the premium collegiate apparel brand, and they're based right out of Indianapolis. Go to HomeFieldApparel.com, look up their Illinois gear, guys. They got Script Illini gear, Flying Illini gear. Their bomber jacket is phenomenal. They just have everything vintage. Everything looks great. All these great logos from Illinois' past, even some hockey gear on there as well. And now is the time to go there because their Black Friday sale is great. 30% off a whole site at homefieldapparel.com. Just use code BFCM24. That's BFCM24 for 30% off site-wide at homefieldapparel.com. If you have an Illini fan in your life that you need a gift for, go to homefieldapparel.com and check out some of the great Illini gear. My personal favorite is the Flying Illini logo. They have a hoodie, they have a t-shirt, and the great things about these shirts, they're great fitting, and they are so comfortable, guys. So go check it out, homefieldapparel.com, 30% off their Black Friday sale. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use coupon code BFCM24, and you get 30% off now through December 3rd at homefieldapparel.com. All right, before we get out of here, Jay, I want to ask you about the Big Ten. Purdue does fire Ryan Walters. There was smoke that they could bring him back. I just didn't see how that was feasible. And then you lose 66-0 to an Indiana team that was angry and had something to prove to the college football committee. So they ran it up on him. What do you make of that? Just 2-year tenure that was a disaster for a guy that I know you and I respect as a football mind. Sure. And where does Purdue go from here?
Yeah, I feel bad for the Purdue fan base and also for Ryan Walters. He's a good guy. He's a good football coach. Man, it just all fell apart on every level, to be honest. And maybe too much too soon. But I think what was surprising to me is he's a good defensive football coach. But if you look at the defensive numbers that Purdue had, they are bad. I mean, they're worse than 2005 Illinois defensive numbers on defense that I played on. They were not slowing anybody down at any level. And the margins of victory that they were giving up, it wasn't like a lot of close losses. Illinois was close. But other than that, the margins were huge. I don't know what it was.
I covered that 2017 Illinois team that none of those games were close. Right. But it was like 20 points a margin. This was 29 points per Big Ten game they were getting beat by.
Just horrible, right? I mean, so it's like it was astounding to watch. I watched them on Saturday night in the old Oaken Bucket game. It just looked like a defeated football team. It looked like they weren't even trying, to be honest. I'm not saying that not everybody was trying, but for the most part, it just looked like they were mailing it in. And obviously Indiana wanted to run it up on them because of the playoff stuff. But it just looked bad. And you had what was sad is you have Ryan Walters calling plays as an offensive coordinator. It just looks so disorganized and so bad. And you're kind of like, ugh, I don't know where you go from here. You got paid. You'll get paid out. You might go to, there used to be the rehabilitation school for head coaches as Nick Saban's analyst. You don't have that necessarily anymore, but probably be an analyst somewhere. And then he'll get hired somewhere. You wonder if any of those staffers that were on Illinois matriculate back. I know it's been super icy with Purdue and Illinois. I'm not saying Walters is coming back, but I'm not saying Kevin Kane is coming back, but there's a whole lot of other staffers that are related there. Do they matriculate back that, have familiarity with the system and Bret?
Where do you think Purdue should go? I mean, this is one of the tougher jobs in the Big Ten that Jeff Brom did great work there. He's the best coach since Joe Tiller, and that was tough for Ryan Walters to follow up, but where does Purdue go from here?
It's a good question. First and foremost, I think their identity is offensive football, and they've had the most success with offensive football coaches and getting a quarterback and throwing the ball around the yard. That's who Purdue wants to be. I think, as an identity. And I think they should find somebody that does that. The defensive coordinator experience with no head coach experience is a no-no. I don't think you're going to see a guy get a job at Purdue who doesn't have head coach experience. So then you feel like, well, who can you get? Can you attract another Power 4 coach to Purdue? Probably not. I know you mentioned Matt Campbell, which
that's a dream. I just make him
that would be a dream scenario. One guy who I've really liked that not a lot of people talk about is and I don't know what his last name is, but the coach at Idaho now. I can't remember what his name is, but I got to cover his name when they played Indiana 2 years ago. He's a pretty good FCS school guy.
Jason Eck.
Yeah. His quarterback got taken this year from to Oregon State. He transferred to Oregon State, so they weren't as good this year, but he's got South Dakota State Jackrabbit roots. He's an O coordinator there.
Played at Wisconsin,
has Big Ten roots. I just feel like he is a guy that and you say, well, why would you take somebody from all the way over there? Remember, Tiller was from Wyoming, when they got him. But he has head coach experience at Idaho. They've had some wins at Idaho. And I just think he has that gregarious kind of personality that you would maybe need at Purdue. I have no idea if he's on the list. He just came to my mind as a guy that I feel like would be the fit that you want. And he was a South Dakota State guy, put a bunch of numbers there as well.
I think the layup would be Jason Candle. That would be the floor for me at Toledo. Knows the area, has run a program, and I agree with you. They're most likely to go with the head coach. If they did go to a coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki would really interest me. I think he is so good. That identity would play there.
Oh, that's good.
The other name that gets brought up that is really intriguing, because I think he was a finalist for the rival job, is Paul Chryst. What would you think of that?
Oh, wow. He was a finalist for what job?
Indiana.
Was he really?
Yeah, he was in the mix there.
Okay, got it. He was also we thought about, he was also in the mix for the Iowa
offensive
coordinator job, right? I mean, they were talking about that. Paul Chryst is kind of a strange one to me. If you would have told me that Paul Chryst was a great football coach when he left, I would have said, no, not really. But what you've seen now with Fickell is you're like, okay, Paul Chryst knew what he was doing, right? And it was kind of the same knock that Bielema had when he first started at Wisconsin. Like, oh, Barry built this. Yeah. Well, Bret won for 7 or 8 years after that. And Paul Chryst won for 8 years at Wisconsin, right? And so he's a good football coach, has won a lot of games. I just don't think Paul Chryst fits there.
Yeah,
I really don't with his model and how it was. Even when he was at Pitt, which he was a 500 coach at Pitt, he wanted to run the football and whatnot. I don't see Purdue doing that or their fans being behind that. I like Jason Candle. I just saw him up and close and personal in the Toledo game last year, and certainly felt like a coach that maybe had missed his initial wave to get out of Toledo, and now the wave is kind of back. And so I think that's a good hire.
Is it crazy that a guy in the playoff is on this hot of a seat? Ryan Day, Ohio State loses to Michigan for a 4th straight year. They got to make a run here, is this job going to open up, Jay? I mean, it's crazy to think about with all the wins he has there, but they have such high expectations, and losing to Michigan that way was tough to watch.
It's 47-1 against Big Ten opponents other than Michigan. The one loss is to Oregon this year. Which they lost in the last second. I was reading an article by Pat Forty of Sports Illustrated, and Pat said that he was doing a deep dive on the rivalry and just how crazy it's gotten there, and how Ryan Day said, apart from my dad dying when I was young, losing to Michigan has been the worst thing for my family in my life, which is sad, right? Like his daughters are affected. Everybody says stuff, and you're just kind of like, is it that important? Let's step back. Let's leave family out of it. It's a football game, number one. But you go out, Michigan, wins the national championship. You go out and spend, in reaction to that, you've lost 3 in a row. You spend $20 million in the portal, and you build your team up to whatever it is. You have 3 potential first-round draft picks at receiver at some point with Ibuka and Carnell Tate and certainly Jeremiah Smith. You go and get the quarterback that you want. You kick Kyle McCord to the curb, who then dominates at Syracuse, which is I'm not sure Will Howard was an upgrade all that much from McCord. You get a new coordinator. But at the end of the day, you still can't run the ball consistently. Like they're playing better defense under Jim Knowles than they were prior. Like I will give them that. Jim Knowles is playing defense isn't the issue. They still have not been able to run the football really consistently since 2014 and Ezekiel Elliott, where they ran the ball really well under actually Ed Warner, old Illinois coach. They have not been able to run the ball consistently, and that has come to bite them. And I will say this about Michigan. Say what you want about Michigan having a bad year. We played Michigan. I get it. Michigan has consistently been able to run the ball and stop the run. Those are two things. They can't do much else. They can't really throw the football. They're not great at much else. But if you can run the ball and stop the run at a high level, you can play with almost anybody if the style of game goes that way. And that's exactly what happened. Do I think Ryan Day should be fired? I don't. I think he's one of the best coaches in college football. I do. But he didn't help himself with how he helped with what he did into that game and some of the timeout calls and not moving the ball one total yard on a 2-minute drive. You just can't do that against Ohio State. And so they're still not going to fire him before the playoff, I would think, though, right?
I think so. No.
Like, okay, my team's in the playoff, they're fired. Yeah. Doesn't make sense.
Oregon, Penn State, Big Ten title game. I'm intrigued, Jay. Yeah, I think this matchup is really intriguing, especially with the defenses. Oregon's offense, obviously, is a little bit better here. But my offensive player of the year was Tyler Warren, and I can't wait to see him go up against Oregon.
I think that's a great pick. Tyler Warren does so much for that program, and will win the Mackey Award almost assuredly for all the stuff that he does. I kind of like that it's not an Ohio State-Oregon rematch. I think, Penn State's been waiting for this moment, has not been able to get the Ohio State, monkey off their back. And I love that it's going coast to coast here. It's Pennsylvania and Oregon kind of battling out. I really believe the team that can run the football the best will win that game. I always forget his name. Jordan James. Yeah. Jordan James, a better runner than people give him credit for. And Dylan Grable is crafty. But the combination of Tyler Warren and Singleton and Katron Allen at Penn State is a tough combination. So I can see Penn State running the football. I know Oregon is favored and whatnot, but I can see it being a tough matchup for Oregon, honestly. And can any of these teams make a run in the NCAA in the playoff? Yes. There's been years, and we've seen this in the SEC, where Bama and Georgia just look. Man, they just look like they're on a different level. 10, 11 starters on going. Michigan kind of felt like that last year with the way they were playing. There has not been one team that felt like that. Even Georgia, I was watching them against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech should have won that game. Yeah. And Georgia Tech's certainly a good team. They're not a great team. So,
by the way, I felt great about Barry Loney's 2-point play calls and goal line calls watching that game.
That was bad. It was bad. And then the funny thing is Georgia, to win the game, they just hand the ball off at the middle and they win, right? It's just that could have been done 5 overtimes ago. So I don't see a huge dominance in that conference. The ACC, nobody's looked really good to me, although I will tell you, I have not watched one game of SMU, who I know is leading the ACC conference. So I certainly can't speak for that. But Clemson doesn't remind me that it's Clemson of 6-7 years ago with Trevor Lawrence. So it's anybody's game, so I think they could.
Well, J Leman, you're the goods. We'll have to catch up before the bowl game. Illinois, most likely going to the Citrus Bowl. South Carolina or Alabama? Sounds about right, Jay? Maybe
sounds about right. All I know is if you're playing Alabama, just stop Jalen Milroe running the football. Will be okay. Other than that, if he runs, we're done.
That's right. Well, J Leman, you're the goods, man. We'll catch up with you down the line.
All right. See you, bro.